Hi everybody, welcome to Mark's 900. I'm Mark and today you join me on a windy day in the Cotswolds and it's time for a 15,000 mile review on this bike. I can't believe it, again, I've done 15,000 miles on this bike. It's pretty much me that's done all of those miles and I've had it now for about 2.5 years. In actual fact, it's done 16,300 and something. So I feel eminently qualified to talk about this bike, what's good about it, what's bad about it and so on. So cast your mind back about 2 years ago and I did a 5,000 mile review on this bike and I talked about all the things that the bike was good at and some of the things that it wasn't so good at. So in summary, the things that it was good at were sort of blasting across the countryside, perhaps going on tour, commuting, looking good, the steering and the brakes are fabulous, the suspension, the performance, the power that it puts out is just wonderful. So I talked about all of that, but I also said, do you know what, if you want to take it on the track and be competitive, you probably want better brakes and suspension. And of course they now do the SE version, which has got exactly that. The other thing I said was that the pillion seat was perhaps not as good as it could be. So if you put someone on the back of there, they're going to be grossly uncomfortable. And I can now say with some authority that my wife has had a ride on the back of this bike, finally. It was so good, in fact, that she's decided that she now wants to get a bike license and we've put her through a CBT and she's already got a 125. But her experience on the back of here, while she enjoyed being on the bike, was very much, that is very, very uncomfortable. So I kind of stand by everything I said in that first video. I do, however, have to make one correction. Now, I talked about the fact that when you start this bike, the revs are quite high when it's cold. So it revs at about 1500, where normally the sort of idle speed is about 700 or 800. And what you can do is manually push the throttle that way to then drop those revs. The idea being that you can clunk it into gear more easily, or if you're upsetting your neighbours, or if you're riding off and you don't like that experience of the bike dragging you along too quickly, you can stop it from doing that. Now, a few people pointed out that that was bad advice, and they were absolutely right. It was terrible advice, so please don't do that. And the reason I say it is because if you hold the throttle back from doing what it wants to do, the engine management system thinks that there is a problem with the actuator on the throttle body and you get an engine management light. I know that because I tried it the other day when I was thinking about it and got the old engine management light up, but luckily, if you've seen one of my other videos, I know exactly how to reset that, so I was able to do it in a few minutes rather than having to take it back to Kawasaki. So yeah, don't try and stop the throttle from racing when you first start the engine and it's cold. Other than that, the 5,000 mile review I think was spot on. Right, in addition to that initial video that I did, which I have to say has been one of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel, I also did a 10,000 mile review on this bike and I was really critical. I got into some of the nuts and bolts of the things that I didn't like. Some of them were self-inflicted, such as the fact that I put this rather nice tail tidy on, but I get water splashing up on my back. I put these rather nice front mirrors on, these rear view mirrors, and now I can't really see much behind me. But to my mind, the bike looks great, so I'm sticking with it. Some of the other things I said I didn't like about the bike were things like there's a little shelf down here which collects water and that's really annoying. It's just a bad design. And as I say, I just really got into the picky stuff about this bike, but again, I kind of stand by what I said. I think all of it was pretty much true. So now what I've got to do is decide what I'm going to talk about at 15,000 plus miles about this bike. Now you've got to realise that I've had it for, what, 2.5 years, so it's been through 3 really bad UK winters, all the salt on the road and all that, because I commute with it every day and I ride it all through the winter. I've ridden it quite hard. I've been across a few countries in Europe now, as you'll have seen from the last video where we went on tour. So, you know, I've ridden it fairly hard at some times, and other times ridden it quite easily on the daily commutes. It's seen sunshine, it's seen rain, but as you would expect, having done, you know, over 15,000 miles now, perhaps there are some gremlins that are starting to creep in with the bike. So firstly, what I'd like to do is concentrate on the things that have gone wrong in the last sort of 6,000 miles or so. Yeah, so there isn't really anything that I can think of that has gone wrong with it. It's just done exactly what it should do. I mean, I start this thing up every morning, it runs, it goes well, it does what I want to do. I'm also still not at the skill level that can say, oh, do you know what? These brakes and suspension need to be swapped out. I know that there's the SE version and it's got better brakes and suspension. I don't know if I'd appreciate it or not. I kind of want them because they exist. So what can I say? I can't really add anything to what I've said on those last couple of videos. So what I could do is do the old 5 things I like about this bike and 5 things I don't like. I could string that out for 20 minutes as I go blasting across the countryside. So how about I do a bit of that now? Don't worry, I am not going to string this out over 20 minutes, but I am going to talk about 5 things I like about the Z900 and 5 things that I don't. So let's start with the things that I don't like. So number 1, that pillion seat is just awful. Number 2, this is the non-SE version. I'd much rather have the SE version with the uprated suspension and brakes. Number 3, lack of toys. It doesn't come with a quick shifter. You can't get a quick shifter with it unless you go aftermarket. And also the onboard computer could give you more information like some of the bigger bikes do. Number 4, the paint on it. I've said this before, it's a common fault with a lot of these bikes. The paint's just really kind of thin and wears very, very easily. And number 5, there's that small shelf that collects water. So things that I do like about the bike, number 1, handling. It's just fantastic the way it goes around corners and it can easily outperform anything that I can do. Number 2, comfort. Brilliant. I've ridden it for miles and miles. I've spent 8-9 hours in the saddle in a day, no problem at all. Number 3, probably the best bit, the engine. This 4-cylinder 948cc engine, absolutely wonderful, smooth, powerful, pulls in all the way through the rev range. It's just wonderful, and again it can outperform anything I can do. And number 4 has to be reliability. I just get on this bike and it works. It never lets me down. Fantastically reliable. Number 5, looks. Now, we're going to talk about it a bit more later, but I just love the look of the Z900. So there you go. There's 5 things I don't like, 5 things I do like. So out here in the Cotswolds with my hair blowing freely in the wind, I can hardly think of anything to add to the last couple of reviews I've done on this bike. Certainly in terms of things that have gone wrong or things that I don't like. I'm still loving this bike. I can't think of another bike I'd rather have instead of it. I mean, maybe a Z900 RS? Maybe a Z900 SE. I think that would probably be the only option. I've certainly looked at bikes like the Ninja, as I've said before, and I was dead set that I was going to go and buy myself a Ninja, right up until the point where I rode it. So what can I add on this video then? Well, I've been having a think about what it is that I really like about this bike. Why is it that I prefer this bike to any of the others that are in this class? And let's be honest, it's quite a competitive class. And I think I've come up with the answer. So I'll tell you what, let's go for another ride around the countryside and I'll tell you why I think this is the best bike in its class and why I love it quite so much. So here we go with my theory, and bear with me, I haven't tested this with anyone yet, so tell me what you think. The reason the Z900 stands out for me is because it was designed as a naked street bike. It's not trying to be something it's not, and it isn't a design that was driven by anything other than to create the best bike in its class. If you're old enough, think back to the 70s and 80s when the only new sports cars were either very expensive or cabriolets. So there was the Golf convertible, the horrible Saab 900 convertible, and the car I had, a genuinely awful Astra convertible that was so heavy it could hardly move and kind of wallowed around corners. Then Mazda built a 2-seater sports car from the ground up, and everyone said they were mad, but the MX-5 became the world's best-selling 2-seater sports car because that's exactly what it was designed to do. Same goes for the Z900, no compromises, just built to do exactly what it's supposed to. Now I do get that back in the day, naked bikes used to be sports bikes that were often crashed, so they just ripped off all the fairing and that became the Street Fighter style. But it was never one that I was a big fan of. Sure, they go quick, but they look horrible. Alright, I've seen a few nice ones at custom bike shows, but they are rare. Anyway, take a bike like the Yamaha MT-09, which is also awesome. It comes from the track, so the engine is sweet, it already has all the toys and can be made cheaply, so that's why it's a better bike on paper than the Z900, and more people tend to buy them. But let's be honest, it ain't no looker, well, not in my book anyway, and the reason for that is because it's fundamentally compromised due to the fact that it had to be built around existing parts, and then those parts get reused for the Tracer and the XSR and so on. So yeah, it's going to be cost effective, but at a price to its looks. Then there's other bikes like the Duke, which is very unique, but if you sat on one, I mean, I'm about 30 years too old for that bike. There's the Triumph Street Triple RS, which is achingly beautiful, apart from those bug eyes that I simply can't get over.
and they are also very expensive because they've only recently got popular and haven't sold enough to compete with the likes of Kawasaki or Yamaha on price. Now, I don't have a clue what Suzuki are doing anymore. Honda would mean a step up to 1000 cc's and several grand more, plus I think that's another piece of reused kit. So there you go, but still don't believe me? Well, there's a couple of new kids on the block in the middleweight naked street category, and they both look very similar to each other. And you know what else? They look a bit like the Z900 because they're both designed as street bikes and don't reuse the engines or frames from anything else. That is a bit of a mixed blessing, to be honest, because the Z900 and its smaller siblings had that very unique Z look, and now that look is being diluted somewhat by the new bikes. Well, I guess imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and perhaps we should be pleased, but now it's time for Kawasaki to step it up, and I wonder what the next major change will have the Z900 looking like.
So that's about it. 16,300 and something miles on this bike, and I'm still loving every single moment that I spend on it. I mean, if you decided to buy one, you certainly wouldn't go wrong. It's got the perfect balance of a bike that can do just about everything. Anyway, next time around, I'm going to be reviewing my wife's 125. But until then, whatever you ride, whether it's a 125 or a wonderful Z900, keep those chains oiled, and I'll see you soon.
Right then, what's this nugget doing in his van? Getting his air off by the look of it. So what? No, don't go backwards. Don't go backwards. No. Okay, that was close. Good work, fella. Have a good day.